Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a tech-savvy veteran builds the ultimate security gate on his land, he never expects war with the neighborhood HOA queen. But when petty power turns criminal, he strikes back with law, logic, and a vengeance no suburban drama has ever seen. This is not just about a gate. They say peace is priceless, but let me tell you what it actually costs. Roughly $23,000 in materials, 4 weeks of work, a county permit that took 2 months to secure, and one pissed-off HOA president with a god complex. I had just finished overseeing the installation of the new front gate to my property, a project I'd spent months designing myself. It wasn't just a gate, it was a statement. A tall arch of matte black steel, framed with tempered glass panels, security grade, impact resistant, and elegant as hell. I had my guys integrate my company's latest AI-based surveillance system into it. Motion detection, facial recognition, license plate logging, and a real-time encrypted feed to my office and phone. And right at the center, mounted on brushed titanium, a plaque that read in sharp serif, "Private access, 24-hour surveillance." This wasn't for show. I'd had incidents before, delivery drivers wandering up the gravel drive, lost tourists mistaking my private road for some kind of scenic lookout. I live with my wife and 2 daughters on a 6-acre spread just west of High Crest Ridge, a sprawling HOA-controlled neighborhood where matching mailboxes are a religion and beige is apparently a sacred color. But my land sits outside their borders, literally. My property line starts where theirs ends. I'm not part of their HOA, I never have been, and I never will be. That, however, didn't stop her from showing up. It was 2 days after installation, and I was oiling the hinges when I saw her marching up the gravel, her heels stabbing into the earth like she was punishing it. Karen Hampton, 63, president of the High Crest Ridge HOA, self-proclaimed steward of all things aesthetic. She'd been sniffing around my property ever since I started construction. I knew she'd make her move eventually. I just didn't expect her to come in person. "Mr. Hartman," she barked before I could even turn around fully. "We need to talk." I stood, wiped my hands on a rag, and gave her my best polite but bored military smile. "We do." She gestured dramatically toward the gate, as if I might not have noticed it. "This monstrosity violates the visual harmony of Ridgeview Road." "Good afternoon to you too," I said. "I'm serious. The community standards, which do apply to Ridgeview Road, I might add, dictate that any frontage visible from public access roads must adhere to the design guidelines ratified in the HOA charter. You're about 50 feet into land that doesn't belong to your HOA, I replied calmly. My property is outside your jurisdiction, Ms. Hampton. I have full county permits. The road is privately owned and maintained. Nothing about this installation involves High Crest Ridge. You're on private land right now. She looked around, as if searching for support from invisible HOA board members. The view from our side is now industrial, cold, intimidating. This is not acceptable. We have standards. I have standards too, I said, like not letting uninvited HOA presidents trespass onto my land. That struck a nerve. Her mouth twitched. I'm giving you the chance to remove the gate voluntarily before we escalate. That word, escalate, hung in the air a second too long. I stepped a little closer. Escalate away, I said. I've got permits, surveillance, and a sheriff who drinks coffee on my porch. You can escalate all the way to the Supreme Court for all I care. But this gate stays. You don't like it? Don't look at it. Karen's jaw locked up like a rusted clamp. She straightened her blouse, composed herself, and said with brittle authority, "We'll see what the county has to say." Then she turned on her heel and marched back down my road. I waited until she was far enough not to hear me, then muttered, "The county already had plenty to say. They said nice gate." I watched her go, knowing damn well this was just the opening shot. I didn't expect things to escalate this fast. Honestly, I thought Karen might throw a few nasty posts into her neighborhood forum and stew in her beige fury for a while. But no, she moved like a petty tyrant on a deadline. It started 4 nights after our lovely front porch conversation. I was woken up around 2:30 in the morning by an alert on my phone. The gate's motion detector had triggered, and the camera feed lit up on my screen. 2 figures, skinny, probably teenagers, hoodies up, one carrying what looked like a gallon bucket. I sat up. hit the manual floodlights from the app, but they'd already splashed the gates with something thick and red. Then they bolted. I threw on jeans, ran out with a flashlight and a sidearm just in case. The gates were dripping in red paint, crude brush strokes spelling out the word Eyesore in shaky block letters. Real mature. I reviewed the footage. Clear as day. One of them turned toward the camera just enough for facial recognition to do its thing. Matched a profile from a previous HOA barbecue event I'd attended years ago out of politeness. That kid, Owen Haskins, 16, the son of Deborah Haskins, who, surprise, surprise, was Karen's second in command on the HOA board. The next morning, I filed a police report and submitted the footage. Sheriff Baker's deputy raised an eyebrow when he saw the video. "Subtle," he said. "You want to press charges?" "Let's hold off," I told him. "They're kids, but I do want the record started." Then came the inspection. 2 days later, a white Ford Explorer pulled up, county seal on the side. Out stepped a man in khakis and a clipboard. Name tag said Randall County Development Office. "Morning," he said. "I've received a complaint about a non-compliant structure obstructing visibility and potentially violating local zoning design standards." I almost laughed. "Let me guess, someone from High Crest Ridge." He gave a non-committal shrug. "Complaint was submitted anonymously." Of course it was. Karen, ever the tactician, appeared at the bottom of my driveway as Randall and I walked toward the gate. She pretended to be just passing by, but the smugness on her face gave her away, like a cartoon villain watching their trap spring shut. Randall did a full walk-around, clipboard out, checking angles, scribbling notes. I let him work. Then I brought out the file I'd prepared months ago when applying for the permits. Stamped approvals, contractor licenses, structural blueprints, even soil integrity assessments. Everything was clean, tight, and legal. When I handed the folder over, he blinked in surprise. "You were ready for this." I smiled. "I used to build defensive perimeter systems for embassies. This is a hobby project." He flipped through the pages, nodded slowly. "Everything checks out. Honestly, this is overkill. I wish more homeowners were this thorough. No violations. Looks like the complaint was a waste of time." Karen stepped forward. "But what about the aesthetic disruption? It's clearly not in harmony with the surrounding community." Randall gave her a neutral look. "Ma'am, that's not something enforced by the county. If this property isn't part of your HOA, your design standards don't apply. He has every right to build this." The flicker of fury in her eyes was beautiful. She stood there, lips twitching, trying to summon another angle of attack. Nothing came out. Randall handed me back the file. "Thanks for your time, Mr. Hartman." Karen followed him toward his vehicle, whispering furiously. He brushed her off and drove off without so much as a glance back. I went inside, poured myself a whiskey, and toasted to bureaucratic efficiency. I knew Karen wouldn't take this lying down, but I'd underestimated just how many rules she was willing to bend and break. I figured Karen would take a breather after the inspection flopped, maybe spend a week rearranging her seashell collection or issuing citations for grass height violations back in her beige empire. But no, when the woman commits to madness, she doesn't do it halfway. It was a Thursday morning when I got the call from Sheriff Baker's office. "Morning, Mr. Hartman," the dispatcher said. "We've received a formal complaint from the High Crest Ridge HOA. Something about your gate posing a safety threat to local pets and children." I almost dropped my coffee. "You're kidding." "No, sir. Apparently the gate closes too quickly and may cause injury if someone were to, quote, attempt to pass through without authorization." I rubbed my temples. "So, trespassers?" "Essentially, yes." I offered to come down to the station and show them the specs myself, but they insisted on sending someone out. Less than an hour later, Sheriff Dan Baker himself pulled up to the house in his dusty cruiser, coffee in hand, and grin already forming. "Thought I'd come see the killer gate for myself," he said, climbing out. "Dan and I go back a ways. I helped him design a perimeter upgrade for the sheriff's impound lot last year, and we'd since become casual acquaintances, the kind who trade war stories over bourbon and eye roll over HOA drama." We walked to the gate together, and I gave him the full rundown. "These gates are equipped with quad-beam infrared sensors," I explained, tapping the discrete emitter towers on each side. As soon as motion is detected within 2 feet of the plane while closing, it triggers a full stop protocol. No crush risk, no trap zones. It's got auto reverse, soft close hydraulics, and speed modulation depending on proximity. Frankly, it's safer than a Walmart sliding door. Dan chuckled, sipping his coffee. Any chance you installed rocket launchers while you were at it? Only metaphorical ones. He reviewed the camera footage from the last few days. 1 cat, 2 squirrels, 3 mail trucks. No one even remotely in danger. The gates performed flawlessly. Okay, he said finally. So let me get this straight. She's mad that your gate closes too efficiently. Because if someone illegally entered your property, they might not be able to escape fast enough? That's the logic. Dan scratched his beard. Jesus, that woman needs a hobby. Then, right on cue, a silver Lexus rolled up to the bottom of the driveway. Out stepped Karen Hampton, clipboard in hand, wearing an HOA logoed vest like she was inspecting a military base. She marched straight toward us, practically vibrating with sanctimony. I trust you've come to issue a citation, she said to Dan. He turned to her deadpan. I came for the show. So far, it's hilarious. Karen scowled. This gate poses an unacceptable hazard. I have 3 signatures from nearby residents whose pets, who don't live on this property. Dan interrupted. This gate is on private land. Your HOA has no jurisdiction here. And from what I've seen, these gates are a masterpiece of safety. If anything, I want one installed at the station. That caught her off guard. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her eyes darted to me, then back to the gate, like she was trying to conjure a new excuse on the spot. Mark my words, she snapped. When a child is injured, no child should be anywhere near private property without permission. I cut in. If they are, maybe that's a parenting issue. Dan snorted, then gave me a nod. All good here, Mr. Hartman. If anything, I'm impressed. He turned to Karen. I suggest you let this one go, ma'am, before you embarrass yourself any further. Karen stood frozen. She wasn't used to being told no, especially not by law enforcement. Dan tipped his hat, got back in his cruiser, and drove off down the gravel. Karen stood in place for another 30 seconds before spinning on her heel and stomping away, muttering something about endangering the community. I watched her go. I should have felt triumphant, but the way she walked, stiff, twitching, boiling, I knew this wasn't over. I'd humiliated her in front of the law, and she'd never forgive that. No, she was about to get creative. I was gone for exactly 48 hours. It wasn't a vacation. I had business in Denver, a conference, meetings with some prospective clients, and a warehouse inspection for a new product line we were prototyping, the kind of thing that used to excite me. But the entire time I was gone, I couldn't shake the feeling that something back home was simmering, like a storm building on the other side of the mountain. I got the first sign as I turned down Ridgeview Road Sunday afternoon. The moment the road curved into view of my property, my gut clenched. The gate, my gate, wasn't there. I hit the brakes hard enough to throw my coffee across the dashboard. Where my $23,000 steel arch had stood was now an empty space. Just raw posts with torn conduit hanging like veins. The ground was chewed up with tire tracks, deep, erratic, wide, heavy-duty truck marks. My cameras, gone. Sensors, wires dangling like someone had ripped them out with bolt cutters. I sat there, stunned, gripping the wheel with white knuckles. Then I saw it, a paper fluttering in the dirt, weighed down with a rock. I stepped out, heart racing, and picked it up. It was a printed memo on HOA letterhead. Per committee decision dated July 14th, the structure at 2137 Ridgeview Road was deemed to be in violation of community architectural standards and was therefore subject to immediate removal by order of the High Crest Ridge Homeowners Association. My ears rang. The rage came slow, the kind that doesn't explode but builds like pressure in a boiler. This wasn't some prank. This was premeditated destruction, theft, trespassing, and it was brazen. They didn't even try to hide it. They left a goddamn HOA decree like they were Caesar issuing edicts to conquered territory. I stormed up the driveway and into the house. My wife met me at the door. She looked pale. "Miles," she said, "I didn't know what to do. I called you, but you were in meetings." "What happened?" "Friday night. Big truck. 2 men in vests. They claimed they were from the county enforcement office. Said there was an emergency demolition order due to safety violations. I told them this wasn't HOA property. They just handed me a copy of the same paper you're holding. They were in and out in 20 minutes. Cut the cameras, ripped everything out. And you didn't call the sheriff. I did. They said unless it was an active crime in progress, they'd have to send someone later. That later turned into now. I called Dan Baker directly. He arrived less than an hour later, this time with a deputy and crime scene tape. He took one look at the scene and whistled low. "Hell of a clean job," he muttered. "Professional crew. They knew exactly where the power lines were, how to kill your comms, where to pull the anchor bolts." "It was planned," I said. "Deliberate, coordinated." Dan crouched to examine the tire tracks. "You got any camera backups?" "I've got the drone logs. Passive flight over the driveway every 6 hours." "Let me check." I pulled the files from my system, and after a few minutes of scrubbing, we found the footage. The truck, a white Ford flatbed, no visible plates, logo partially covered with tape, but not enough. Dan paused the footage, zoomed in. "Son of a bitch," he muttered. "That's Davis & Sons Hauling. They're under contract with, wait for it, High Crest Ridge HOA for landscaping debris and construction disposal." We locked eyes. Dan stood, his face colder than I'd ever seen it. "Miles, this ain't HOA nonsense anymore. This is felony-level theft and destruction of private property. You've got a permit. You've got video. And if that crew was hired by the HOA, we've got conspiracy, possibly organized criminal mischief." I nodded, jaw clenched. "I want charges. I want blood." "We'll start with statements," Dan said. "I'll need the footage, the letter, your permits again, and any emails or communications you've got." "Done." Before he left, he asked, "You want me to reach out to Karen directly?" "No," I said. "Let her wonder how hard this is going to hit. She thought she could get away with this. She just declared war." As the sheriff drove off, I stood at the end of my empty driveway, staring at the place where my gate used to be. The wires still hung like torn nerves. My girls peeked out from the window, confused and frightened. My wife sat quietly in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't sipped from in 20 minutes. Karen had made it personal, and now it was my turn. I didn't sleep that night, not from fear, from calculation. While my wife dozed restlessly on the couch, I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers, receipts, and 2 laptops. I was building a war plan, not just to defend, but to counter-strike. By dawn, I had a stack of documents ready. Itemized damage estimates, invoices, a draft of a formal demand letter, and, most importantly, a crisp copy of my county-approved permit, now highlighted, tabbed, and scanned in triplicate. The cost of the original gate and installation was just over $23,000, but that was only the tip of the iceberg. The damage from their little operation had knocked out my full surveillance system, another $12,000. The smart locks and gate control units, toast, $7,000 more. Then there was the loss of business. 3 commercial deliveries had to be rerouted during my Denver trip because the front entry was blocked, 2 of them canceled. Total value lost, over $110,000. And that wasn't counting the damage to reputation when one of my clients, a real estate security contractor, emailed me to say, "If you can't protect your own gate, how are you going to protect ours?" That one stung. By 9 a.m., I had emailed the HOA board a formal document package labeled Notice of Claim. The email subject line was polite but clear. Claim for damages resulting from illegal removal of private security structure, total $653,000 inside the PDF. Full list of direct and indirect damages, evidence of legal installation, footage from the drone showing their hired truck, sheriff's initial report, and a nice final note. Failure to respond within 5 business days will result in civil action without further notice. Then I printed hard copies and sent them via certified mail, just in case Karen decided to accidentally delete my message. By noon, I was on the phone with an attorney. Not just any attorney, Elena Vargas, former federal prosecutor turned civil litigation flamethrower. I'd worked with her once when a rival contractor tried to sue us over patent nonsense. The man still twitches when he hears her name. She didn't even flinch when I told her what happened. "They destroyed your property using hired labor under false pretense with a letter that has no legal authority," she said. "Jesus, Miles, that's not just civil, that's criminal. I want to bring down the whole board. You may get your wish. Start preparing your criminal complaint. I'll draft the civil suit paperwork today." That afternoon, the sheriff's office called. Dan sounded grim. "We interviewed the Davis & Sons crew. They thought the job was legit, said the order came from HOA President Karen Hampton directly, told them it was emergency code enforcement, gave them a printed work order. Did they give you a copy? Yep. Want to guess whose signature is on it? I didn't need to. By evening, things got worse. For her, one of the HOA board members, a guy named Tom Brenner, showed up at my gate, or what was left of it, holding a folder and looking like he'd just had a religious awakening. "I want to talk," he said, nervously glancing around like Karen might drop from a tree. I let him in. "I didn't vote for this," he said immediately. "She forced it through during a closed meeting, told us it was urgent, said the county would fine us for architectural pollution if we didn't act. She lied to the board." She lied to everyone. Tom handed me an email printout. It was Karen, days before the gate was taken down. "We can't let this stand. If we act decisively, Hartman will back down. He doesn't want legal smoke. He's a family man. Tear it down now. Deal with the consequences later." I stared at the email. Calm, cold, manipulative. Tom sighed. "I'm stepping down from the board, and I'll testify if you need me." "Count on it," I said. By nightfall, Elena had already drafted the initial complaint. We filed the criminal complaint first: trespassing, conspiracy to destroy private property, impersonating government authority. Then we prepared the civil suit, $653,000 in damages, maybe more once discovery started. As I hit send on the filing notice, I allowed myself the first real smile in days. Karen wanted to play games? Fine. I just changed the rules. It's funny how quiet a neighborhood can be when everyone's terrified. After the complaint was filed and word got out that I was suing the HOA for over $600,000, the usual traffic around Ridgeview Road all but evaporated. No dog walkers, no lawnmower hum, even the mail guy stopped honking. Karen, however, didn't go underground. No, she doubled down. The first sign came when my property records disappeared. I was trying to update a parcel boundary report through the county's land services portal, standard follow-up after submitting a damages claim, and got a strange error. My property wasn't listed. Instead, a pop-up message read, "Record under internal review. Contact Land Services Office." I did. The woman on the phone sounded confused. "There's been an amendment submitted on your parcel last week," she said. "It's under manual hold pending authentication." "What kind of amendment?" "It appears someone requested a boundary adjustment. The northeast line was moved to reclassify a portion of Ridgeview Road as a shared access lane." I felt my stomach twist. "Who submitted it?" She hesitated. "Let me check." "Ah, it was filed by a Karen Hampton, HOA President, High Crest Ridge. Attached memo says it's for community access clarification." My silence probably told her everything. "That amendment shouldn't even be accepted," I said tightly. "She has no authority over this property." "I agree. That's why it's on hold. But the request almost got through. Someone in our GIS team flagged inconsistencies." "You're telling me she almost rewrote the county map?" The woman paused. "Mr. Hartman, off the record. This kind of alteration requires inside help, somebody from inside the system." That night, I called Elena. "She's trying to alter county records now," I told her. "She filed for a boundary shift. If it had gone through, it would have given the HOA leverage to call my access road shared property. She wants a retroactive legal basis for destroying my gate." Elena went quiet. Then she said, "This just became a criminal conspiracy case. I'm calling the DA in the morning." But Karen wasn't done. The next day, Monday, I left the house for a 2-hour drive to meet with a new subcontractor. I came back to find my wife standing on the porch, pale and furious. "They came again," she said. "Who?" "Some guys in orange vests, claimed they were with county code enforcement, had clipboards and hard hats, said they needed to finish the removal. They started tearing out wiring from the fence." "You let them?" "I told them to get lost, but they just walked around to the side gate and started working like they owned the place." I bolted down the driveway. The tire marks were still fresh. The side security box was ripped open. 2 cameras were missing, not just damaged, removed. Cables were dangling, sliced clean. One of my motion lights was shattered. The bastards had climbed over the fence, disabled the outer security loop, and started dismantling the east panel on private property in broad daylight. I pulled the security logs. The whole event had been recorded on the internal drive of a protected camera hidden in a birdhouse, something I'd installed just for fun. I watched as two men, again in matching safety vests, moved with alarming efficiency. Bolt cutters, crowbars. One of them even carried a printed work order in a clipboard sleeve, marked with a fake county seal. They moved like a demolition crew with a deadline. My phone buzzed. It was Dan. "You're not going to like this," he said. "We've traced the amendment request Karen filed. Turns out it came from a workstation inside the county GIS department, a technician named Willis Kearns. We pulled his login logs. Guess who approved the submission on his lunch break? Kearns." "Yup. He's under investigation now, already trying to cut a deal. And he says Karen paid him? No cash, but there's evidence she promised him land access perks, some kind of sweetheart deal involving community facilities. I told him about the men who'd just been on my land. He groaned. Christ, we've got full-blown fraud, bribery, impersonating officials, and now criminal trespass. That's organized crime. That's prison." Elena and I filed an emergency injunction by 5 that afternoon. I also submitted a new complaint to the State Attorney General's office citing public record fraud, abuse of power, and conspiracy to interfere with private ownership. Then something unexpected happened. That evening, my email pinged with a message from a burner account, truth@hrboardprotonmail.com. Inside were 6 PDFs, scanned minutes of HOA meetings, private ones, that had never been released publicly. One stood out, a special executive session from 2 weeks ago in which Karen told the remaining board members, "We cannot allow a military-grade eyesore to dominate the approach to our neighborhood. If we must act outside traditional mechanisms, so be it. We've already tried formal measures. Mr. Hartman won't cooperate. He doesn't respect our authority." Another note, handwritten and scanned, read, "Removal crew has been scheduled. As long as there's no physical resistance, the optics will work in our favor. If he files charges, we say it was county miscommunication." I forwarded everything to Elena and Dan. "This is enough to warrant a search warrant for HOA HQ, Dan texted back. "We're moving in tomorrow." I slept a little better that night, but only a little. Karen had declared war. Tomorrow, the state would answer. The thing about justice is, it never moves fast enough, until it does. Then it hits like a freight train. By the end of the week, Karen Hampton went from queen of the cul-de-sac to prime defendant in a felony case. It started early Monday morning. I was sitting in my truck, sipping bitter coffee in front of the county courthouse. Elena Vargas sat beside me, a storm in a blazer. Her bag was full of binders, flash drives, and printed exhibits. She carried enough legal firepower to raise a mid-sized law firm. "Today's the arraignment," she said. "Just a formality. But the media's here. Let's make sure the public sees exactly what happens when a HOA tries to rewrite reality." The sheriff's team had already executed 2 warrants over the weekend, one at the HOA's main office, the other at Karen's home. They seized laptops, printed documents, and, most critically, the original signed work orders given to Davis & Sons. Not copies, originals, stamped with Karen's signature in a fake emergency compliance seal she'd made using an online novelty stamp shop. Karen was arrested without drama. She came quietly, but someone, maybe a deputy with a dark sense of humor, cuffed her in front of her hydrangeas while 3 of her HOA allies stood on the porch with their mouths hanging open. At the arraignment, the list of charges was read aloud. Defendant is charged with criminal mischief in the 1st degree, conspiracy to commit property destruction, impersonation of a public official, bribery of a county employee, falsification of public records, and unlawful entry. Karen stood stone-faced. But her lawyer, some suburban real estate litigator who clearly didn't expect this kind of heat, was sweating bullets. Elena, on the other hand, had ice in her veins. "The defense will argue this was all a misunderstanding," she whispered to me, "and we'll bury that argument in a mountain of receipts." A week later, civil proceedings began. The courtroom was packed. HOA board members who hadn't fled were called to testify. Tom Brenner, the one who'd stepped down, gave a calm, damning account of how Karen steamrolled the board using fear and deception. He brought copies of the unauthorized minutes, emails, and the kill order she gave the demo crew. The jury listened, eyes narrowing. Then came the county technician, Willis Kearns, the GIS guy Karen had bribed. He'd flipped fully by now. His testimony was brutal. "She asked me to adjust the parcel map to make it look like the road was shared property," he said. "Told me it was just a formality, that it would keep things clean on paper. promised me access to her pool and a free ride on HOA facility fees if I helped. He looked genuinely ashamed, but his words landed hard. Then Sheriff Dan Baker took the stand. He was calm, direct, and almost smug. "We reviewed all video footage provided by Mr. Hartman," he said. His surveillance system was thorough. The gate was removed by a private crew acting on forged authority, and we found those forgeries at the HOA office. No question, this was a coordinated act of illegal property destruction. "And in your opinion," Elena asked, "was Mr. Hartman within his rights to install the gate?" "Absolutely. He followed every law. Got county permits. His property was outside HOA jurisdiction. He was targeted because someone didn't like the way it looked." Karen's lawyer objected. Overruled. We ended the day with the surveillance footage from the birdhouse cam, blown up on the court's projector. The two men climbing over the fence, cutting wires, carrying a clipboard with fake insignia. One even smirked at the camera. The courtroom was dead silent as the video ended. The next morning, Karen changed her plea to no contest. The prosecutor leaned in with a whisper deal, not to avoid punishment, but to avoid dragging the HOA into a complete organizational collapse. Still, the judge had no mercy. This court finds that Ms. Hampton abused her position of influence in a sustained campaign of intimidation, deception, and destruction. Her actions were not only illegal, they were arrogant, calculated, and contemptuous of the law. He sentenced her to 3 years in state prison, plus 2 years probation. She was led from the courtroom in cuffs, lips tight, eyes blank. But the courtroom wasn't done. Next came the civil ruling. Elena stood before the judge and laid it out clean. Property destruction, $136,000. Surveillance damage, $19,000. Lost business, $112,000. Legal costs, $64,000. Emotional damages and punitive, $322,000. Total judgment, $653,000. No one from the HOA even tried to argue. The court ordered full restitution. HOA assets were frozen. A special administrator from the county was appointed to run the board until further notice. Karen's name was stripped from every HOA record by order of the court. And I walked out of that courtroom with my head high, Elena at my side, and 3 news cameras asking for comment. I kept it short. Don't mess with a man's gate. It took 6 weeks for the dust to settle. The HOA was effectively dismantled, the board stripped of power, its assets frozen, and an interim county administrator appointed to untangle the legal mess. Homeowners in High Crest Ridge were suddenly very quiet. A few of them even dropped by to apologize. Some left muffins. One left a bottle of wine and a note that read, "I always hated Karen's hedges anyway." Karen's house went on the market 2 weeks after sentencing, priced aggressively, bought by a tech startup guy with pink hair and a vintage hearse in his driveway. You could almost hear the sound of beige shutters gasping. As for me, I built new gates. Not just any gates. Bigger, taller, stronger, made from blackened steel and anodized carbon composite, like the kind you'd see guarding a secure lab in a sci-fi movie. 2 hydraulic towers on either side, complete with rotating cameras and a subtle low hum when they opened, almost like the doors of a spaceship. But the real showpiece? The plaque. This time I had it custom engraved in brushed gunmetal, mounted on an LED backlit panel. Private property HOA free zone. Trespassers will be laughed at by sheriff. It was petty. It was glorious. Sheriff Baker came by the day we finished installation. He leaned on the hood of his cruiser, sipping coffee, admiring the new setup. "Well, Miles," he said, "I think we can call this one decisive." "You think I overdid it?" He gave me a side glance. "Hell no. You made it art." That same week, my business saw a spike in orders. People from all over the state, some even out of state, started calling after the story hit local and national outlets. The YouTube clip of Karen being dressed down in court hit over 2 million views in a week. Comments flooded in, "HOA destroys gate, gets destroyed by law. When you mess with a veteran's fence, expect war. Respect the gate, Karen." Someone even made a t-shirt. "I stand with the gate." Sold out in days. Elena, now fully vindicated, became a minor celebrity in legal circles. She picked up 3 new high-profile clients from the publicity. Last I heard, she was being offered a guest slot on a legal podcast called Don't Make Me Sue You. She deserves it. My daughters, they started calling the new gate the fortress. One of them suggested adding flamethrowers. I told her we'd circle back on that during phase 2. My wife, for the first time in months, finally slept through the night. But victory, as sweet as it was, came with a few scars. There's something about being the target of organized harassment, the lies, the manipulation, the sheer audacity of it that leaves a permanent crack in your trust. It reminded me of my military days, how bureaucracy can be just as dangerous as any battlefield if you're not paying attention. But it also reminded me that sometimes standing your ground isn't just about protecting property. It's about sending a message. That private land means something. That authority doesn't get to expand just because it wants to. That no matter how many titles, boards, or fake clipboards someone carries, the law still matters. And yeah, maybe I got a little satisfaction watching Karen's Lexus towed away while she stood in ankle restraints. Just a little. So here I am. A man with a bigger gate, a stronger business, and a new slogan for the company. It's printed now on every one of our trucks. Hartman Defense so good, even HOAs are afraid. Somewhere out there, I'm sure Karen's trying to file a complaint about it. Let her try.